Good morning. I'm Stephen Brobeck, Executive Director of the Consumer Federation of America. I'm joined by Bob Berry, President of the Financial Planning Association, and by Janet McCallan, Executive Director of that association. This morning we are releasing the results of a national survey on how Americans regard the importance of financial planning and related financial services. We are also announcing a new service provided by financial planners to supply this advice. The Consumer Federation believes that one of the great financial services needs of our country is making available comprehensive, competent, and affordable financial advice to low and middle income Americans. Without access to such advice, many of these individuals will not be able to develop an effective but realistic financial plan. Research shows that those who develop and carry out such a plan build far greater wealth and have much greater financial peace of mind than those who don't. Do consumers have an interest in developing such a plan? Our survey says yes. More than 9 out of 10 Americans say that financial planning is personally important to them, while nearly 2/3 say that this planning is very important. Also, our survey shows that this interest has been growing. More than 1/2 of Americans say that they believe financial planning to be more important to them today than it was a year ago, while only 5% say that it is less important. Clearly, the terrorist attacks have had a lot to do with this growing interest, because more than 1/2 of those we surveyed say that as a result of these attacks, it has become more important personally to have a financial plan. The interest of some Americans in planning has grown more rapidly than that of others. Young adults and African Americans in particular express far greater interest in financial planning today than they did 6 or 12 months ago. We would speculate that for these two groups, which have lower incomes and far lower assets than the rest of America, first the economic slowdown, then September 11th, were wake-up calls about the importance of planning for the future financially. Despite the great need for and growing interest in having access to comprehensive, competent, and affordable financial advice, most low and middle-income consumers find it difficult to obtain this advice except from printed sources. Of course, print and even web-based programs are no substitute for personal, one-on-one advice from a financial expert. And that is why the willingness of the Financial Planning Association to make available the pro bono services of hundreds of their financial planner members is so significant. The Consumer Federation of America commends the association for making this important commitment. This national program, available to American savers, was inspired by the successful advice program of Cleveland area financial planners to Cleveland Savers. American Saves is a national social marketing campaign to encourage and assist Americans, especially those with lower incomes, to save and build wealth. The Cleveland demonstration project for this campaign, which to date has enrolled 1,400 savers and has persuaded an estimated 10,000 other area residents to save more effectively, makes available free consultations of up to 30 minutes by phone to the Cleveland Savers. Who has the most interest in this type of free expert advice? Our recent national survey reveals that, again, it is young adults and African Americans. About 1/2 to 2/3 of each of these groups say that they desire free advice from financial planners by phone or by email. And now two key leaders of the Financial Planning Association, Bob Berry and Janet McCallan, will talk more about this service. Bob?
Thank you. It's a tremendous opportunity to be here today and to formalize what has existed for decades in the financial planning profession, the establishment of pro bono financial planning services. As financial planners, as an association, we have a fundamental belief that financial planning and the financial planning process leads to better financial decisions. And we think that it's critically important that all Americans, not only the wealthy, have access to competent and ethical financial advice. In the post 9/11 era, what we've seen emerge from clients and prospective clients is more of a focus on how to have their life control their finances instead of their finances controlling their lives. People are clearer about focusing on long-term goals and on developing long-term strategies that will enable them to have a life that is everything that they ever hoped that it would be. We've seen more of a focus on savings and on focusing towards retirement, on education funding. And it's critically important that the relationship that exists, the dynamic between an advisor and a client, happen on a regular basis. It's been a dynamic that has proven to be beneficial for Americans and will continue to be beneficial for Americans in the future. Our effort here is to try to focus the value of financial planning and the value of the financial planning process and get that focus down to the lives of all Americans. What I'd like to do is introduce Janet McCallum, and Janet's going to explain to you a little bit about how our program works.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Steve. The Financial Planning Association has a Financial Planning National Support Center, and our members have volunteered to provide pro bono services, pro bono advice to people who contact us through our website, which is at www.fpanet.org, fpanet.org, or who call us at the toll-free number of 800-647-6340. And the way this works is we will have a specialist who will get the information from them, determine if there are any special needs that they have of the advisor, and then send that information to the advisor, who will then in turn contact the individual and arrange for a time for them to talk. We hope to be able to provide someone locally to most callers, although if they have special needs and we need to connect them with someone further away, we will also do that. The advisors who are participating in this are bound by a letter of understanding, which the client will also sign, and the letter of understanding kind of specifies what the engagement will be, that there are limits to it. However, the advice is free. The advisors are also bound by all the rules of the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards, and other applicable regulatory bodies. The fact that this is not for a fee does not change the fact that it is still an engagement, that the advisor is bound to follow all those regulatory requirements. And they're also bound by FPA's Code of Ethics, which includes the principles of integrity, objectivity, competence, fairness, confidentiality, professionalism, and diligence. We strongly believe that everybody needs objective advice to make smart financial decisions, and that we hope that this way of connecting our members with those who have questions, who have needs, is a way to help people understand the value that financial planning can bring to their lives. And now I think we're ready to take questions.
I have two questions, one about the timing of the poll and another about legislation now moving through as a result of the Enron scandal. The one about the timing of the poll is, when was your previous poll? You mentioned 9/11 as the trigger, but since 9/11 we've also had Enron, so I was wondering if you were tracking it. The second question, there are provisions in the 401k legislation, the various versions of 401ks that are moving through Congress, that would promote financial planning, various incentives, tax incentives, payroll deductions, so on and so forth. I was wondering if you could comment and analyze on those.
We would prefer not to comment on any legislation because the organizations may have different perspectives. The purpose of this press conference is to focus on the survey and the service. We would be very happy at CFA. I'm sure FPA would be very willing to talk to you after the press conference. Call us at our offices. The timing is, this happened, well, it was really wasn't planned so much for, we started planning this, I believe, before Enron. And it just so happened, in fact, we planned it before 9/11, started planning it before 9/11. And the motive really was the strong interest of the Financial Planning Association in supporting the Emerging America Saves campaign, which was first announced a little over a year ago, and in which we announced a great expansion about a month ago. But it turned out that our survey was sort of fortuitous in terms of its timing. And what we did is we did not do two surveys. We asked people how their opinion had changed. And but we asked two questions because we thought there were two variables that were influencing people's opinion: the economy on the one hand, and terrorism on the other. And of course, the reaction to Enron is all bound up, I think, in their reaction to the economy. Remember, we're asking a broad array of the American public, most of whom did not have a financial dependency on Enron, didn't have stock investment in Enron. So, so to get at those two variables, we ask one question: compare yourself how you feel now to a year ago. And we thought that that would essentially help to measure all the different variables, change over a year. Then we asked them, how are you affected by 9/11? And then we get a reading just on terrorism, but the interesting thing was the consistency. And it appears that 9/11 had the big effect, sort of really a jolt to people, and strongly encouraged them to start thinking about managing their financial affairs in a more prudent way. We've done earlier research that suggests that consumers became more interested in paying off debt and saving. Now, but this research is a little different. Just because you start paying off debt doesn't mean that you're going to have an interest or actually plan financially. That's in some ways a more challenging step. So this survey reveals that, somewhat to my surprise at least, that an overwhelming portion of the population have a very strong commitment and interest in financial planning, and there's also been a pronounced shift in increasing interest in Americans, over half of Americans say, in developing a plan and engaging in planning. Yes?
Let's follow up on that. So you have no previous survey results beforehand to see how many people had expressed interest before, but I guess my question is, do you have any sense of what percentage of the U.S. population currently uses some type of financial planning advice? And can you talk a little bit about the America Saves campaign and why that was necessary? I'm presuming that financial planning is, predominantly used by people in the upper classes, but do you have any numbers to support that?
Well, maybe there are a lot. That's a very complicated question. It might be interesting for Bob or Janet just to comment on the number of people, first of all, who say over the last 5 years, just a ballpark estimate, who actually have used formal financial planning services. Now, people can plan at their kitchen table, with their spouse or on their own. That also is planned. But first, maybe let's look at those folks who are actually paying for financial planning services, and I can talk a little bit about the folks who aren't and relate that to America Saves.
Numbers. I would say that probably the numbers of people that have been using comprehensive planning services as opposed to just planning over a kitchen table or using an internet probably is, I would think, in the 30-40% range. And I think that the critical issue is something that you raised, which is there is a sense among middle income and lower middle income households that financial planning, is only for wealthy people, and that only wealthy people are going to benefit from entering into an advisory relationship. And that's a myth that we're hoping that programs such as this can help to correct, because that's clearly not the case. And what we found is that people are willing to articulate what their goals and objectives are, and then to develop a long-term strategy to meet those goals and objectives. I think the value in the planning process is that when there's a relationship between a competent and ethical advisor and a consumer, that advisor is there to make sure that plan gets adhered to, and it really becomes a union of the spirit to achieve lifelong goals and objectives. And we think that dynamic is an important added value to the process. People that don't have significant amounts of money can obviously afford to make fewer mistakes. And one of the ways that mistakes and miscues can get minimized, and one of the ways that opportunities can get realized, is to engage in a process that has, as part of it, a dynamic where those goals and objectives are going to be articulated and those opportunities can be seized, and clearly to try to minimize wherever possible the mistakes and the missed opportunities.
If in fact, say, in the last 5 to 10 years, about a third of the population has actually purchased financial planning services, our research suggests another third have planned on their own or with the use of the internet, and a third really haven't done any planning. Of course, there are degrees of effectiveness in planning, but we at CFA have been concerned for really a couple decades that those households, those individuals in our country who most need to plan and who probably most need financial planning assistance simply because of educational levels or because they're young and they haven't really had the marketplace experiences, the financial experiences that older people have had, did not have, or at least did not think they had, readily available, comprehensive, competent, and affordable financial services. And this has been confirmed by our research, not just national surveys, but also focus groups that serve as the basis for our Developing the America Saves campaign. We found that there was, for example, in both national survey and a set of 4 focus groups, no understanding at all of the miracle of interest compounding. In fact, even well-educated people didn't really understand how much money you accumulate if you start investing even at a 5% yield when you're in your 20s, how much that accumulates to when you're, say, 65. You can actually see a little example here in your packet. Watch your savings grow, and you can see this is really geared for those who are starting to save. $50 a month may not appear to be very much, but look what happens if you put it away $50 a month at just 5%. Over 40 years, you're up at $76,000. Now, our focus groups revealed that many low and moderate income households do not think they can save $1,000. That is a huge barrier. In fact, many of them, since research we released about a month ago revealed that 9% have negative wealth. That is, they owe more than they have in assets. Many of these households just have this crushing debt burden, and they don't think they'll ever be able to lift that off their shoulders. So what we're trying to do with America Saves is provide encouragement, information, and actual assistance to those households. Now, at the local level, the America Saves campaign has been launched in 2 areas. Cleveland and Kansas City is being organized in about 10 other areas of the country. And the folks who enroll in those local campaigns will have access to a whole array of services and benefits, including, in most areas, free advice from local financial planners, the local chapter of FPA, which is sort of why I think, got this idea in the first place. Nationally, however, we know we're not going to be able to organize in all communities in the country, even in the next 10 years, so we wanted to make available a stripped-down version of America Saves, and you can really see what that entails here in the pamphlet. The enrollment form, basically people have to select a goal and develop a simple plan to achieve that goal. The goal can be paying off a certain amount of debt. It can be developing an emergency fund. It can be saving the down payment for a house. It can be saving for an education, saving for retirement. And they have to identify a dollar amount that they can save every month, an account where they can save it, and make a commitment to our program. Everybody's on the honor system, but we believe people, they say they're going to do it. Most of them will do it. But what the National America Saves program lacked was the sort of one-on-one kind of contacts and advice that in a local area you have available to you: motivational workshops, 401k workshops, one-on-one wealth building sessions with wealth building coaches, and phone advice from financial planners. We obviously can't make those services available to the entire country, so FPA stepping forward and making available their 500 participating financial planners to American savers is really a great step forward for our program. Yes.
Just follow up then. So typically, because you emphasize that it's a relationship that you build with a financial planner, and that you're talking about kind of, monitoring progress on the path to this goal. What you're doing is you're offering people a 30-minute session where they can get started, and then is your hope that they will then decide to establish a ongoing relationship? Or, I mean, on one hand you're saying the benefit comes from having this long relationship. On the other hand, this agreement, it's, you get a free shot for 30 minutes and then you're on your own.
Well, clearly, I think that the long-term goal would be, yes, that they would establish a relationship. And I think that one of the values in how this program is structured is giving people some comfort in getting over that first hurdle, in working with someone and asking the questions and being asked the right questions, and getting a sense that financial planning isn't only for wealthy people, and that even incremental steps applied over time and developing good strategies and habits is going to pay off. And yeah, they may have an opportunity in this program to focus on a singular issue, whether it be paying down debt or saving for college or saving for a down payment on a house. But those are things that are important to people, and I think when they have an opportunity where they don't feel like there's a cost attached to it and they don't feel like they have any obligation, the opportunity for them to experience the benefits of the process, we think, are fundamentally important. And I don't think that the values that they'll garner by having had that experience will go away. But yeah, clearly I think our long-term goal would be that they'll establish a relationship in some type of an advisory capacity once they see what the power of saving is and the power of having a long-term strategy can be, and how much benefit that can bring to their lives and the lives of their families.
What are they going to pay for? What's a typical, can you talk about the fee structures that financial planners use, and, how much a middle-income family might pay then for some kind of, how often they would meet with a planner, roughly how much outlay they're going to have a year?
Well, I can talk to you from experience, and having done this for 20 years, that one of the blessings of this profession is that you pretty much can find a planner that will have a compensation or will have a fee structure that's conducive to working with people of all different income levels. Obviously, planners that work with higher net worth people have different fee structures than people that work with middle America or lower income households. But, at the end of the day, the issue still remains, I think. If a consumer can see the value in the process, I think that they're more inclined to be willing to make the commitment, not only of their own money, but their own time, to continue to be an active participant in this process. And I think that if they are interested, I'm sure that in their area, whether it's a large brokerage firm, insurance people, certified financial planning professionals, whatever, an individual can establish an advisory relationship that's conducive to their ability to be able to pay and their willingness to make a commitment moving forward.
During the conduct of your survey, did any reference or mentioning of concern over Social Security come up as contributing to this desire to maybe start involving themselves in planning?
No, though there's been other research, survey research, of course, on this. There is growing concern, especially among young adults, with the ability of the Social Security system to adequately fund people's retirement. And of course, that's at the same time that the whole private pension system is in the process of being revolutionized, with much greater risk and responsibility being given to individual employees. So people are more aware of the need to plan. On the other hand, there are in some ways more risks out there because their employer is not going to necessarily take care of them with a pension when they retire. And people are also aware, and we've done surveys on this, that Social Security will not allow them to maintain their current standard of living. It depends from income level to income level, and certainly lower income people depend very heavily on this, but even then it will not replace low incomes. But we believe, and we have quite a lot of research to back this up, that most low-income people can begin to accumulate wealth. I mean, there are the anecdotes we've seen of low-income people who have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Just think, if you start saving $50 a month, as as we've illustrated in our pamphlet, over a period of decades, and you build up tens of thousands of dollars. Suppose you buy a home. People don't realize that home ownership, paying off that mortgage, is, for the broad middle class, the most effective way in the past that people have built wealth. Making the mortgage payment sounds contradictory because it's debt, but it's debt that actually helps you build equity, and it's, in a way, an effective forced savings program that in some ways is more effective than 401ks, which is the other key strategy, because frequently your dollar contribution is matched on a 100% basis by your employer. But the problem is it's so easily now to cash that out when you go from job to job. Too many younger people are doing that, I think partly because they're thinking, well, I can save for retirement later on. And it's a big mistake, because then they lose that ability to take advantage of the miracle of interest compounding.
One additional, more practical question. Does this program have any general overall guidelines for the investment advisors that are participating in it? For example, if someone calls and they're in debt, serious debt, I mean, does the program tend to work on that first before worrying about saving? I mean, what good does it do to invest at 5% if you're paying 18% on $10,000 of credit card debt?
Well, that question should be addressed to the America Saves program, probably also to FPA and the financial planning profession. Just for America Saves, we basically look at debt as a component of wealth. And as a result, if a person is at a negative point, or even has, because they have their consumer debts are far exceed, we're not talking about mortgage debt here, consumer debts far exceed their assets. In America Saves, people have choice. We don't push them into a saving, into a goal. I mean, they really have to decide. But if they ask us, what do you think we should do? In Cleveland, our wealth building coaches are retrained credit counselors. Now, you can imagine what those retrained credit counselors are going to advise them to do. Yes, and in Kansas City, they're retrained mortgage counselors. So, I mean, our wealth building coaches tend to have a lot of experience with helping people manage unlimited budgets, people who carry large consumer debts. But what we found in Cleveland is that about a third of our savers said, the wealth building coaches really don't have the sophistication that I need. I want to develop an investment plan. I want to develop a retirement plan. They can't really help me. And it's that point that we had some financial planners in, starting 2.5 years ago, planning the Cleveland Saves demonstration project. They said, well, look, we'll go to our local association. Association responded enthusiastically, so then we added, trying to meet consumer demand, an additional level of service that is working out very well now.
I think historically what you're going to find is that planners, as a general rule, aren't going to focus necessarily on singular issues without trying to get some understanding of what peripheral issues there are to bear. So I think that the good news is somebody that's motivated enough to pick up a telephone and make a phone call because they have a problem similar to the one that you articulated obviously is a positive, because they're getting involved in the program. I think what you're going to find is going to happen is that those people, in the counseling period that they have with a financial planning practitioner, hopefully there's going to be some questioning going on about whether or not, A, that's the major issue of the day, and B, whether or not there are ancillary or corollary issues that should be addressed at the same time. So there's a sense of integration that's going to take place, but I think in some circumstances someone will have a specific issue or a specific question, and one of the things that we're going to try to do when making referrals to appropriate planners is to get people specifically in touch with people that have areas of expertise or have expressed areas of expertise in uncertain issues. So it's developing an asset allocation strategy for a 401k plan, or understanding the stock market, or if I'm going to start putting money into a mutual fund, do I buy a stock fund, or do I buy a bond fund, or do I buy a balance fund? We're going to try to make a connection that's going to optimize that individual's participation in the process. So we're going to try to steer them to somebody with a particular area of expertise.
What are the eligibility criteria for participating in the program? You say it's geared to low and middle income families.
No, this is for everybody. In fact, in Cleveland, all of the leaders, including myself, enrolled as Cleveland Savers. And this is not a program that we want to be associated with just low incomes. Our marketing, is geared toward the folks who are not saving, and they tend to be those who have low to moderate to middle incomes. They also tend to be actually younger adults between the ages, say, of 20 and 45. They're disproportionately minority. They're disproportionately women on their own, you know, sometimes married, sometimes not, sometimes with children. In terms of, in Cleveland, 70% of our savers are women, and they tend to be younger. 70, yeah. We think, you know, when you broaden this to include financial planning services, we think that percentage, we're guessing, will come down to 60%. And your typical income is 20 to 50,000. That's almost everybody in Cleveland, where we marketed heavily in the city, which is over half of whose population is African American. About half of our savers are African American. And this service is free. There's sweat equity. You have to work at developing a plan, at a goal and a plan, and then putting that into effect. There is effort involved, but it doesn't cost you anything. Now, in Cleveland and Kansas City and some of the other areas, a question came up, okay, I want to start savings, and I have $100 or $50 to open an account, but no bank or thrift will take my deposit because it doesn't meet the minimum requirement for a deposit. And plus, if I don't quickly build that deposit up to $300, I'm going to be whacked with a $3 to $5 fee every month for not meeting the ongoing minimum balance requirement. 15 institutions financial institutions in Cleveland came forward and said, we will make available a starter savings account with no fees and either no minimum balance or a very low minimum balance. And that's happened in every community that we've gone to. Now, it's not available necessarily nationally, but there is a residual savings account that most Americans aren't aware of. It's actually offered by the federal government, by Treasury. It's called U.S. Savings Bond. Now, back 20 years ago, nobody bought savings bonds because the yields were too low. Until just about 6 months ago, you could get 6% on a Series I bond, and right now the rates are, I think, about 4.4, 4.5. Interest rates, of course, are going up. The I bond has inflation protection. The double E bond does not. The interest rate now is a little lower. But for folks who want a automatic savings, there is what's called Easy Saver. You tell the federal government to deduct automatically monthly or every other month from your savings or checking account a certain amount. They will do that, and they will send you a savings bond. And it won't cost you anything. That money is really liquid after 6 months. After you get that, you've made the purchase, after 6 months you can cash it in with only a 3-month interest penalty, and then after 5 years there's no penalty at all. And the only thing to remember is if you hold on to it for a long period of time, after 30 years you stop getting interest on it. So, but you know, that's, most people will not forget that. So, are there other questions? No, thank you very much.